Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars. You're watching another one of my YouTube guitar building videos. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope that by the end of this video, I'll have earned the honor and privilege of your subscription. Now, as the title of this video would indicate, there are not really any industry standards that guitar builders follow. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I get questions all the time in my videos from folks who want to know things like how deep should they make the neck pocket? How deep should they make the pickup pockets? How thick should they make the body of a guitar? What should the angle of the headstock be? What should the angle of the neck be? What radius should they make the fretboard? Just a whole range of different questions. And I know what people want is a number. That one definitive answer to their question. They don't want something vague. They don't want a range. They want something very specific that they can shoot for. And I can understand that because that means they don't have to do the math. And let's face it, sometimes doing the math can be time consuming and complicated. And unfortunately, since there are no standards, I'm left to basically tell the viewer when they ask these questions that they're going to have to do the math. And really the questions that they should be asking are, what factors determine the depth of a neck pocket? What factors determine the depth of your pickup pockets? What factors determine the angle of your headstock, the angle of the neck? You know, all those juicy little details that need to be hashed out before you start building your guitar. And fortunately, there is no industry standards for any of this. And that's a good thing, because if there was an industry standard covering all these things, then guitar building would get pretty boring. And there wouldn't be as much variety when it comes to the final outcome. And that's never really going to happen. You're never going to have industry standards in guitar building, because to do that, what you'd have to do is organize all the companies that make guitars to form a guitar building association where they would all get together and determine what those standards would be. That's never going to happen because, first of all, trying to get a bunch of guitar manufacturers together for something like this would be, it wouldn't be impossible, it would just be difficult. And furthermore, I think the guitar builders know that once you were to adopt standards, then their ability to innovate or to offer different products would come to an end. And that's not a good thing. And we should all be thankful that there are no industry standards. Now, there's also really no rules when it comes to building guitars. And rules are different than industry standards, because what rules are basically govern the techniques that we use to make guitars and how we carve, route, sand, and finish the guitars, the bodies, the necks, the fretboards. And there's an old saying, I think it's kind of a gruesome saying, and I've never understood where this came from. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Not that anybody wants to skin a cat, but people say it. So I think you understand what I'm talking about when I mention that saying. There are more than one way to carve, route, shape a guitar body. There's more than one way to make a neck. There's more than one way to make a fretboard. But within those different techniques, there are rules that you really have to follow in order to do it correctly. And unfortunately, there are far more rules than I could possibly cover in this video. I can only give some examples that I hope will steer you in the right direction when it comes to understanding the work that you're going to have to do if you're going to build a guitar from scratch. For example, you can use old school methods such as hand cutting the shape of the body with a saw, like a bow saw, and then planing, filing, rasping, any contours, that sort of thing. Drilling and chiseling out the pockets for the pickups and all that. Or you can use a CNC machine, as I'm doing in the modern era, to drastically simplify the whole process and to improve consistency and precision. But regardless of the technique and the approach that you're going to follow to build a guitar, you're going to have to follow certain rules of thumb when building them. And one of the most important rules of thumb that I think often gets overlooked, but it's critical, is respect for the center line. Because your body, your neck, your fretboard, they're all going to have a center line, usually running the length of each of those parts. And to build the guitar correctly so it's going to function properly, you need to know where that center line is, and you need to make sure that everything lines up. Not only does the neck have to follow the center line, but the placement of the pickups, the placement of the bridge, they all have to follow that center line. And unfortunately, part of the process of building a guitar can oftentimes mean that the center line can shift slightly. And this is usually as a result of sanding and getting the final shape of the components. When you start to fit them together, you'll notice sometimes maybe the neck has shifted a little bit, and all it takes is to shift the nut, a 1/64 of an inch or a fraction of a millimeter to either side, and that can totally move everything so that nothing lines up. And we have to find ways to address that issue. And there are ways to do that. But to understand what's happening, you've got to understand the relationship between the center line of your neck and fretboard and the center line of the body and the position of everything relative to that center line. And if things are off, you have to quickly figure out how you're going to address that in order to salvage your project. That's just one rule of thumb. And there are many other rules of thumb, like, for example, the thickness of your guitar body. I get asked that question all the time. How thick should the guitar body be? Fender makes their guitars 1 3/4 inches thick, and I'm sure there are other manufacturers that follow the same. But when it comes to determining the thickness of the guitar that you're building, you don't have to make it 1 3/4 inches thick. You can make it thicker, or you can more preferably make it a lot thinner and cut down on some weight. But that overall thickness, and here's where the rule of thumb comes into play, is going to be determined by the height of your controls. How deep are they into the body? Same thing with the pickups. How deep are they going to be in the body of the guitar? That's why it's so critical to draw up a plan of your guitar before you build it. And one of the critical considerations is determined by doing a side view cross-sectional drawing of the guitar so that you can see how the pocket is going to interact with the control cavity and how it's going to affect the thickness of the guitar. And then there's things like the neck pocket depth. That's going to be determined. The rule of thumb, at least for me, is the type of bridge that you're going to be using on the guitar, because the type of bridge is going to determine the minimum and maximum height of the strings off the body. And that's what helps you to determine, along with the thickness of the neck's heel, how deep the neck pocket has to be, so that when you finally string up the guitar, you'll have your string action at a playable height. So there are rules of thumb when it comes to designing and building the guitar, but they aren't set in stone. In a lot of situations, you can, for example, if you're going to build a guitar with a two-pneumatic bridge, you have to angle the neck Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get the appropriate string action. But if while you're designing the guitar, you decide, I really don't want to go to the trouble of angling the neck, I'd rather keep the neck level with the body, you would simply have to change to a different bridge design, one that allows you to lower the strings closer to the body. So there's a lot of rules of thumb that you need to follow. But like I said at the beginning, there's no real industry standards. So when you're wondering, as you're planning a build, how deep to make pockets, you're going to have to do a little bit of research, and you're going to have to do some math. There's just no escaping it. And I wish that, luthiers like myself could provide you with a simple number that you would follow. For example, you should always make your pickup pockets 7/8 of an inch deep. But that just doesn't work in every situation. So you've got to do your planning and figure out, based on all the other factors, how deep you need to make the pickup pockets, how deep to make the neck pocket, how tall should the shafts be on your potentiometers, or how thin should the wood be above the control cavity in the back so that you can mount your selector switch, all those little details. And there are so many of them. And as you design your guitar and preparations to build it, you're going to have to iron out those issues before you start to build it. And if you're building a guitar for the first time, be prepared for the possibility that along the way you may encounter issues you didn't expect to encounter. And those are the issues that help us to become better guitar builders as time goes by. But it doesn't always happen on the first build. Now, I was lucky when I built my first guitar, 25 years ago. Everything went together just perfectly, and I was really surprised. But then in the second guitar I built, I think I was a little cocky, a little bit arrogant. And when I built it, I ran into a few problems that I didn't expect, because there were issues that I just wasn't aware of. And I hadn't done enough research, enough really deep research, to understand what needs to be done and how to solve those problems even before they happen. So once I learned what those problems were, on the third guitar, I was able to solve those problems, but then a couple of other new ones popped up that I wasn't prepared for. Now, a good way to avoid this, or to minimize the number of issues that you may run into as you're building a guitar, is to get a good reference source. And I'm going to post a link in the description below for a book, maybe a couple of books, that will help you to solve some of those problems. And you're going to have to read those books from cover to cover before you build them, so that you become aware of all the possible issues that you might run into. Another way to avoid it is to purchase plans for a guitar where a lot of all of that has been solved. And as it just so happens, I have a website, eguitarplans.com, as well as a merch store, my Highline Guitars merch store, where I sell plans for guitars. Now, these are all original designs. They're not copies of existing designs. But I've done all the math and figured everything out about it as far as the layout is concerned. For most of the issues that you might encounter when building a guitar, if you modify it or try a slightly different approach, maybe change a bridge or change pickups or something like that, then you're going to have to do some of that research and math on your own, because it's not going to be answered in the plans. But if you purchase plans from my website, and I also sell plans for the tools that we use to build guitars, like a drum sander, flip-top work stands, a CNC machine, a CNC pickup winder like the one I've got down here. And any purchase that you make on either of those two sites is going to help support this channel, so that I can keep building these guitars and sharing my experiences with all of you. And if you want to keep your support simple, you can click the thanks button, leave a tip in the amount that you think is fair. And also, I would encourage that you include a question. If you've got a question about guitar building, include it with a tip, and I guarantee that I will answer your question. And of course, if you have enjoyed this video, get anything out of it, or if in any of my videos, if you enjoy them, give them a thumbs up, because that's what helps supports this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, but it tells YouTube that you like the video, and as a result, they're going to promote it to other people who have similar interests. And the more people who are watching my videos, and especially commenting on the videos or asking questions, the more all of us can learn about the process of building guitars. Because unless you're building a kit, building a guitar from scratch is complicated. And I want you to be successful. So until the next episode, as always, take care, stay safe, and I hope you'll be back for more guitar building videos.